Today on ACC Legends Podcast, I have great Charlie Scott, a legendary player, Hall of Fame player, played for UNC, one with the first Black star player in the ACC, all NBA, all ABA, all NBA, won the Olympic gold medal in 1968 in Mexico City, won a world title with the Boston Celtics in 1976, and spent the last 40 years or so in business. Charlie, thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. So, well Charlie, you grew up in Manhattan, and so my guess is you probably started playing basketball in the 50s. What was the basketball culture like in Manhattan? Had the pickup culture started for African Americans in Manhattan in the 1950s?
Well, really, I started. Don't make me that damn old. I started playing basketball in the 60s. It wasn't the 50s. But basketball was always big. And first of all, everybody got to realize, the Rucker tournament was the first tournament ever of having professional basketball players playing a summer league. They have other leagues now that do that, but Rucker tournament was the first tournament that had that. I remember as a young boy, I went out there to watch Fat Sanders and Will Chamberlain and Connie Hawkins and other guys play in the Rucker tournament. So that's where I first got my indoctrination into basketball. I used to go watch the Rucker tournament when I was 11 and 12, and then that's when I got my interest in playing basketball and started playing basketball at that time. Before then, growing up in New York, especially growing up in Harlem, and I grew up there when you had the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Giants and the New York Yankees. So we had a lot of baseball. Baseball was big in that time with Jackie Robinson, Roy Campanella, and guys like that. So I grew up starting off being a baseball enthusiastic person, but I found out that I was afraid of the fastball. So I had to change my sports and I started playing basketball because we had a park down the street from where I lived, and I used to go in the park and watch the guys play. Then I started going there and started playing basketball and picked it up and eventually started getting good in it, and that's how I really started in the sport.
Now, was pickup basketball bigger in Manhattan, Harlem, than it was like in Brooklyn and Bronx and in the other boroughs?
No. Basketball was big in Brooklyn, and basketball was big in New York all the way. You got to remember, basketball. The bad part of basketball, you forget, goes back to CCNY when they had the point shaving scheme. So basketball was always big in New York City. Connie Hawkins and them came from back in the late 50s and early 60s, and Roger Brown, and we always had great basketball. Rucker tournament always brought together the great basketball players. Like I said, when I was 11 or 12, you go there and I would watch Will Chamberlain, or the Tom Jones or Zach Sanders, and guys that went to NYU or guys who went to St. John, and basketball was always big. It's just that at the time when I was growing up at first, baseball was the biggest thing because again we had the Dodgers and we had the Yankees and we had the Giants. But eventually, as those teams, it's real funny, as those teams moved out of the city, basketball became bigger and bigger and bigger, and people started playing basketball more or less. And to be honest with you, I think basketball really took off in the New York area real heavy when Texas Western won the NCAA tournament, because 5 of the players on Texas Western came from the Bronx. Wow. So that really indulged us into college basketball. So, basketball was always on the back burner, but it became big really in the late 50s and the early 60s in New York.
Yeah. Well, Charlie, did you play against white players on the playground too, or were all the playgrounds all black?
Well, no, basketball, and first of all, when you came to the Rucker was interracial. Players came from all over the place there. And you had players that came from Long Island. You had players, in fact, you had players that played in college that used to come to play in the Rucker under different names because you weren't allowed to play basketball and, on teams if you didn't play when you played in college. A lot of college players would come to the Rucker and play under different names, and we assumed names, but everyone knew who they were. But was the idea to get to see basketball? So basketball really became big, and what really made it bigger in New York was in 1963, Loyola Chicago won the NCAA tournament, I think they beat Cincinnati in the finals. But the thing about it is that Loyola Chicago had two guys that were from New York, Jerry Harkness that went to DeWitt Clinton, and another guy named Ed Smith that came from Commerce in New York. So that gave New York its first big players that were from New York to win the NCAA tournament. Then you go to 66, and you have Texas Western would have five guys that came out of New York City. In fact, one of the guys who went there the year after that was Tiny Archibald, because all the guys that were before him, Neville Shares and all those other guys, Willie Worsley and them, were from Tiny Archibald's Bronx AAU team. They were older than Tiny, so they were there first, and Tiny went to Texas Western after they went there, and that's what our indoctrination to really become a basketball city.
When did you know you were something special? When did you know that you were gonna go somewhere playing basketball? At what point?
Well, I never thought I was anything special. I just knew that the only way I would get an opportunity to go to college would be if I got a scholarship. I grew up by myself. My father died when I was 14, and my mother and father had split when I was 11. I had lived with my father at that time, so I was basically by myself after the age of 14. And basketball was just something that I took to, and I started playing. And then my height really was the thing that really stood off more than anybody else, was the fact that I was when I was 14 or 15 years old, I was 6'2", 6'3", which at that time was pretty tall for most players. So I was playing a center, for my AAU teams at that time. So, I mean, that's when basketball really took off for me.
Right. So I know you ended up in Laurinberg, which is a famous school in North Carolina that's produced a lot of great players. Where did you go to high school in New York, and who was your coach there?
Well, the thing about it, I went to a high school in New York called Davidson High School for the ninth grade. This high school was an superior academic high school. In fact, it's one of the top 3 high schools in the country, public high schools in the country. You have to take a test to go there. In the 8th grade, 20,000 kids out of the city of New York. That's the only school where you can go to where you don't live in the district. So 20,000 kids take the test, and only 800 get to go every year. So I took the test to go to Stuyvesant when I was in 9th grade, and I went to Stuyvesant High School, which is a purely academic school. But when I got there and I wanted to play on the basketball team, at that time there was still racial bigotry in New York like everywhere else, and the basketball coach would not let me play on the basketball team. Even though I was a top AAU player at the age of 14 in New York City at that time, he would not let me play on the basketball team. So I knew that if I stayed at that school, no matter how well I'd done academically, I wouldn't. I knew that I would not be able to afford to go to college, and if I didn't get a scholarship to go, I wouldn't be able to go. So that's why I had some friends that were going down to Laurinberg Institute, which was a private school that had a great basketball theme about it. In fact, some players, Jimmy Walker, that ended up going to Providence and being the number 1 draft choice of the Detroit Pistons, was there, had gone there, and a guy named Dexter Westbrook that came from our area had gone there. They'd gone from there to Providence. So I had seen that as an opportunity for me to go to a school that had a connection with a major college, and that my opportunity to go to college would be much larger if I went there at that time.
And how did you play there? Were you a star of the team right away? Did you rise to the top?
Well,
right away?
See, you keep saying the star. I went to a school where every player in there was a star from where they came from. So we all thought of myself as a star. In fact, one of the players that went to school with me at that time was a guy named Earl Manigo, who everybody said was a player, who supposed to be one of the greatest players out of New York City. I played with him for 2 years, and he never started on the team with us. So, I mean, that shows you how sometimes hype is more than it really is. He was a 5'11" power forward, which was hard to play in real basketball. But in New York City, because he could dunk, that made him a phenomenal player. But he went to Laurinberg to try to raise his grades, and I was there with him at that point in time, and other basketball players that went on to college. But I never really, in fact, I never had and it was never even thought of. When you come from New York, we never thought of players as being better than the other. We all just went out there and tried to play. Really, I would say that the differential started really with the recruitment when I found out that other coaches found me better than the other players when I started getting recruited for Davidson and other schools, and my high school coach really was recommending me. I never thought I was any better than the other players on our team. In fact, I thought other players were better than me, but that's the way I had thought about it, and things were just different than what maybe I was better than maybe what I thought I was.
Yeah, well, it always is nice to be humble. Makes you work harder. Now, your high school coach it was probably your first serious coaching that you ever had. What was his name again, and what did you learn? What did you learn from him?
Well, Mr. Frank McDuffie was the coach, but he was also the principal of the school, Laurinberg Institute. You know, what I learned from him was how to play discipline, and also he was the one that really understood my academic prowess and understood the circumstances of my basketball ability. And he was the one that really understood the importance of being the first black at the University of North Carolina. And that never even crossed my mind part about being the first black at the University of North Carolina, with North Carolina being the first state university, and the importance of that. Those were never in my decision-making process when I was choosing to go to school. I was choosing on how I felt about the coach and how the coach felt about me, and how the team possibilities of being a national team was. So when I was in high school, I had really committed to go to Davidson at that time, who was number 2 school in the country. And not only that, Lefty Driesell was the coach, and he had allowed me to pick all the other 4 guys that would be coming into my class. Every time he had a recruit come up there, I would go there. He would send for me, and I would come there, and he asked me how did I like the guy, and did I want the guy to be the teammate. So I ended up picking the other guys that ended up going to Davidson, and when I eventually didn't end up going, guys like Doug Cook and Mike Malloy. Those were the guys that when they visited Davidson, Coach Driesell had me come up there and ask me how did I feel about them, and I said I wanted them guys to be my teammates, and those the guys he'd offer scholarship to. But eventually I ended up going to North Carolina.
Did those guys end up being the first black players at Davidson? So if you would have gone to Davidson, would you have been the black player at Davidson?
I would have been the first black player wherever I had gone in the South at that time.
Right. Okay. So, and Terry Holland, the future UVA coach, was he on Lefty's staff at Davidson? Or was he?
In fact, he was a player. He had just finished playing. He had just graduated, and he was on Lefty's staff at that time. Terry Holland was.
Right. Okay, so you end up. I talked to Lefty this weekend. He tells me you call him all the time. He really appreciates that. He said that you paid your early deposit. You end up going to UNC. Now, I imagine one of the reasons why you went to UNC is because of Dean Smith.
Well, see, people don't know. When I went to UNC was the last place team in the ACC.
That's right, yeah.
They weren't winning at that time.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I wanted to go to Davidson. Davidson and Duke were the top 2 schools. Really, Davidson, Duke, and North Carolina State were the top schools in the state at that time. That state was Press Maverick, and he left state because at that time the ACC had a rule: you had to get over 800 on the SAT in order to get into in order to play in the ACC. Mm-hmm. That's how the ACC kept out black ball players. You got to remember Lou Hudson, Walt Bellamy, Herman Gillian. And there's a lot of players that were from the state of North Carolina that did not go to the university because they did not get over 800 on their SAT. So they were not allowed in the ACC at that time. ACC. That's the way the ACC kept black ball players out.
Right.
So when I went to Carolina, and in the ACC, there were no other black ball players in the South at that time.
So what was it like socially for you? Were there other black students already at UNC that weren't ball players? And socially, how were you able to adjust to an all-white environment?
Well, I told you I've been in an all-white environment when I went to Stuyvesant High School, so that was not a new environment for me. Right. Being academically able to go to Stuyvesant made me mentally prepared to do anything because, like I said, Stuyvesant was the top high school in the country at that time.
Right.
And so I knew I could academically go to any school. And like I said, I had gotten 1496 on the SAT, so I wasn't worried academically about going to school. So, the thing was that schools was, the real reason, Coach Smith was not the real reason I really went to Carolina. The real reason I went to Carolina because the assistant coach there at that time was Larry Brown. And Larry was more closer to my age, was from New York, was a basketball player, and I related more to Larry than to Coach Smith at the time that I went to. That was really as far as the coaching staff, that was the most important person to me on the coaching staff that I really related to was Larry Brown, who was my freshman coach when I went there. Also, Larry was the reason that I went to Carolina, and the players that were coming on the freshman team at that time, and also one player that was on the varsity at that time was Larry Miller. That would be a guy I would get an opportunity to play with because he would be a senior when I would be a sophomore. But the freshman team was the guys that really I was enthusiastic about because those guys, that was Rusty Clark, Dick Grubar, Joe Brown, those were the guys who eventually ended up going to three straight ACC tournament, winning three straight ACC tournaments, three straight ACC and Eastern Regionals. And they're the only team that ever done that in the history of the ACC.
Yeah. Well, I listened to an interview with Perry Wallace, who was the first black player in the SEC. And one thing that
I know Perry. I knew Perry.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you did.
He played for Vanderbilt.
Yeah, really good player. And one thing that he said, one of the hardest things that he had to deal with is just walking across campus, like that dead time when he had to walk across campus. Did you have that feeling when you were kind of all alone, those difficult moments?
Well, you know what, though? I got to say it's a little different for me and Perry. Perry went to a school that didn't have a good basketball program. He went to Vanderbilt, in the SEC, where the only team in the SEC that was good in basketball was Kentucky at that time.
That's right.
That was purely a basketball. So Perry went to a school that had no basketball ideology behind it. I went to a school that basketball was number one. Not even football was number one in the ACC. Basketball was number one. The ACC was really number one basketball team. And so I went to school where basketball was the prioritized thing. So basketball was very important to everybody on that campus. So the basketball players were very important to everybody on that campus. So, I was treated very well because I was a basketball player. And really, Chapel Hill is a very libertarian area of North Carolina. It was the most libertarian area you could probably be in North Carolina.
Right. So, but socially, would you go over to hang out at UNC Central? I think it was called something different back then. But did you?
No, it wasn't Central. It was North Carolina College at that time.
Yeah,
but you got to realize. But hey, I lived in North Carolina. They had 8 goddamn black colleges in North Carolina, and the only black face any person ever saw in North Carolina at that time was mine. So I had a field there. I could go there. Think about it. If you're the only black idol in the whole state, and they got 8 black colleges, I had a great time.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so you play freshman ball. Obviously, you can't play varsity. Back then, you didn't play varsity until your sophomore year. And then you play with Larry Miller. Like you, Larry became an ABA legend. I think he had like 50 points in one game in the ABA at one point. 60. What was Larry Miller like? I know that he was the kind of player that liked to shoot the ball a lot, and Dean Smith had to kind of get Larry to play within the team concept at some points.
When people say that Larry was not that way. Maybe he was that way coming to Carolina, but Larry Miller made it very easy for me to join the team because he was the star. You got to remember the year before I played with him, he was first team All-American, They won the ACC. He was most valuable player of the ACC, outstanding player of the ACC. And, and really they had everybody coming back but Bobby Lewis. And the only change would be me and Bobby Lewis. So really there was a lot of pressure on me because that team had just gone to the NCAA Final Four for the first time in like 20, 30 years. So Larry Miller was the one that made it very comfortable for me to come there and play at ease because he welcomed me with open arms and he wanted me to feel as comfortable. And you got to remember, Larry came from Pennsylvania. He was used to playing with blacks.
Mm. Right.
You had some guys on that team, Larry Miller and Dick Grubar. Dick Grubar was from Schenectady, New York. Larry Miller was from Pennsylvania. So those guys were used to playing with black ball players. So it wasn't a new thing for them. I mean, the other players on the team, Rusty Clark, Bill Bunning, Joe Brown, all those guys was from the South, had played in the South, had never had black ball players on their team before. So all that might have been new to them. But Dean Smith had chosen a group of players that were open because Dean Smith was very, very much open to black ball players. So, I mean, the players he recruited had to be in the same mindset of him and of Coach Smith. So, therefore, there was not much there. I had no problem with the team at all.
Yeah. I watched the ACC special, and there was a moment where UNC was down badly at halftime, and you basically told Dean, give me the ball, coach. I can do this. And I think you scored 28 points in the second half. What game was that? Was that against Duke?
That was the ACC tournament finals against Duke.
Yeah.
We were down 11 at halftime. But what had happened, see, the story is, I mean, you started, what happened was the game before then, our point guard name was Dick Grubar. He had been the point guard for the team for all 3 years he started. He got hurt in the ACC tournament. The game before that, he tore his knee up. So when we played Duke, we went into that game without our point guard. That's like going to a game where you had your quarterback and then you go into the game without the quarterback.
That's right.
On a football team. So we were playing really out of order of the way we usually play because we had lost our point guard at the very essence of the semifinals of the finals of the ACC tournament. He was not able to play, because he had tore his knee up. So that had really put our team in a point where we were just discombobulated. And so we were down 11 points. And what it was that I saw, that was the first time I saw in my teammates' eyes that despair where that they thought we were going to lose. So, I mean, I just blurted out, like I felt like that Duke didn't have anybody could stop me and that I was hot at that time. I hit like 13 straight shots. So I just blurted out, just give me the ball and just get out the way and we'll be okay. Because we were 9 points down and that was the essence of that game.
Yeah. Well, you got to the NCAA tournament. I think you got there 2 times, and you played Davidson both years. Was it strange playing against
in the Eastern Regional Finals?
In the regional final, was it strange playing against Davidson? And you beat them both times, right?
Yeah, well, for me, it wasn't strange because for me, to beat them was the most important thing to show that I made the right choice. I mean, for Lefty, it was strange because, like I said, Lefty probably looked and said, if I don't find this guy, nobody even knows about him. He ended up in Providence. So, I mean, and that's why Lefty and I are so close because I really give all my credit to really, no one recruited me in the South until Lefty recruited me in the South.
Right. Well, then you play.
So,
I'm sorry, Charlie. Go ahead.
Yo, go ahead.
No, well, then at one point you played Lou Alcindor in UCLA in the Final Four, I believe. Did you know Lou Alcindor from New York, and what was that game like?
Yes, we grew up together. I knew Kareem for a long time. We had grown up together. I knew him when he went to Powell Memorial. In fact, we played in the Rucker tournament together when we were in high school.
Okay. Yeah. So nothing about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and UCLA surprised you?
No, well, first of all, they were a fantastic team. They had Lucius Allen, Mike Warren, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Those 3 guys were really unstoppable.
Right.
And regulation. They were I mean, they were a great team. They were a great team.
Yeah. Well, while you're on the UNC campus, it was a turbulent time. As a matter of fact, I believe the King assassination what happened while you were at UNC. What was that like while you were at UNC? And did it
I mean,
change things?
and like I said, I was a basketball player, a star. I mean, I was treated like that at UNC.
Mhm.
Even like I said, UNC was very liberal. It was a very liberal school. I mean, I had no, I had no problems on campus. I had no problems in North Carolina. I had no. I mean, it was when we went other places I had problems.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, you went to the 1968 Olympics. That was the Olympic game when Tommy Smith and Mason.
John Carlos.
I'm sorry, John Carlos. Yeah. What was the Olympic experience like in '68, and what was it? What did it mean to you to win a gold medal?
Well, to win a gold medal meant a whole lot, but the Olympics was very disjointed that year because of the circumstance. It was '68. It was time of boycotting. I mean, it was the essence. You got to remember that was during black movements all over the country at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very turbulent time. And to be honest with you, Avery Brundage was a racist. I mean, he called all of us players, all the black athletes into the room and told them, after John and John Carlos and I went to junior high school together. We both are from New York. I've known John since he was in junior high school. But Avery Brundage called all the black athletes together in a room after John and had done what they had done. And I said if any other ball player do that they would be left in Mexico City and would not be allowed, and would not be brought back to America. Wow. So we were threatened.
So, well, you do win the gold medal, and then your college career is over, and you end up at the time there was the ABA was an option, and also the NBA, and you chose the ABA. Why did you choose the ABA, and did you enjoy playing in the ABA?
Well, I chose the ABA at the time because the time when I chose the ABA, Larry Brown, like I said, who was my high school coach here, my college freshman coach, and he was playing on the ABA team that I had told you that he had wanted me to come to the ABA because he had said if I came to the ABA and that team at that time had Rick Barry on it also. Mm-hmm. And they were saying that when there would be a merger that team would be allowed to come to the NBA as was. So, I mean, I thought I would be able to go in the NBA with a team. I mean, I had already known that I was going to be drafted at that time. I think it was either going to be Cincinnati or Detroit was going to draft me. And neither one of those teams were good teams in the NBA. So, I had knowing that I would get a chance to play with Larry and Rick Barry, I chose to go to the ABA because I thought I would get an opportunity to play with those guys.
Yeah. And what was it like, the ABA? Was it organized? Were the things about it that it wasn't quite the NBA yet? Or so what was the life? It
wasn't quite the NBA. Of course, it wasn't quite the NBA yet, but it was. I mean, it was professional. It was professional basketball. I mean, in fact, the ABA is the NBA now plays more ABA style basketball. Right. So the ABA was the forefront of what the NBA is like now. Well, not like now, because like now it's terrible. You just stand in the goddamn corner, shoot a jump shot. But I mean, the idea of the 3-point play and the open court play was more the ABA style. That's right. Before then, the NBA was more, big men, Will Chamberlain. You throw the ball to the big guys. Right. ABA was more run style, open offense. So that was the NBA became.
Yeah. Well, you end up joining the NBA, and you played in Phoenix. I believe one of the guys you played for was Cotton Fitzsimmons. So did you enjoy the transition to the NBA? And I mean, you scored a lot of points right away.
I came to the NBA, I played in the ABA with Julius Erving. I played in the NBA with Connie Hawkins. So, I mean, those were my biggest things, to get to play with those players. Right. Cotton was on, like when I came to the NBA, Cotton, I was only up to 7 games with Cotton. Cotton left the next year.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
He didn't coach that team. He went to Kansas City after that. So, I mean, I didn't really get an opportunity to play for Cotton.
Yeah. So, well, then you end up going to Boston. You and Paul Westphal switch teams. And I believe you rejoined your friend Paul Silas in Boston as well, and
Yeah.
that team wins the NBA title. The interesting thing about that team, I think there's at least 4 NBA coaches on that team. I think Cowens, Silas, Don Nelson, and I believe one, and Havlicek, I think might have a coach. Anyway,
So Havlicek never coached.
He never coached. Okay.
Never coached.
Okay, but what was that experience like playing in Boston and winning a world championship?
You had Silas, you had Don Nelson.
Don Nelson, that's right. So talk about that experience playing in Boston, a storied franchise and winning an NBA title.
Greatest experience of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I can say. Greatest experience of my life for playing basketball.
Right. It was easy
Not
to
the
fit.
city, but the team. Mm-hmm. And Red Auerbach.
Yeah. That's right. What was he like? What was he like to play for? Just like you would see on
He's the greatest guy in the world to play for.
Yeah.
Red Auerbach understood how he understood the psychology of basketball. And what I mean by that is that Red Auerbach would come into the locker room and he would go over to JoJo White and say, JoJo, your son, he's looking big. And JoJo would be happy. He talked to JoJo about his son. He'd go over to Dave Cowens and give him a cigar. He'd be happy. He'd come over to me and say, Charlie, you did great. That's all the fuck I want to hear. I'll be happy. He'd go past Paul Silas. He'd curse at Paul and Paul curse back at him. That made him happy. Red just knew what each person, he understood basketball. You do what it takes to get the best out of each ball player. That's what he did.
Yeah. Was it strange when you played against the Phoenix Suns? Now look, Phoenix had drafted Alvin Adams, and they went, and all of a sudden they had Gar Hurd. Their team was all of a sudden in the final, and it's one of the most famous finals in NBA history. I think there was a triple overtime game that could have gone either way.
Yeah, I mean, all that's true. But to be honest with you, we never thought that they could beat us. They never beat us all year long. We beat them 4 straight times during the year. And then, see, basketball is very simple. It's a matchup game. You look at their matchups, then we had 4 Hall of Famers on our team. Me, JoJo White, Paul Silas, and John Havlicek. They had Paul Westphal that ended up being a Hall of Famer. That should answer all your questions.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, Charlie, this has been great. It's so great to talk to you. One thing about your game, and I watched you play when I was young. It seems to me you could have been a star in today's game. There's a lot of times when you watch replays of old NBA players, their games look a little bit dated. It's just the way, whether it's Bill Russell or Bob Cousy, they're great players, but it's hard to visualize them playing today. That wasn't the case with you. I think you could have gone out there today and been even a bigger star today. Do you feel that way?
Well, I would have been a better player. Oh, today's player was a lot easier. Would have been a lot easier. See, when I played, guys could put their hands on you, could knock the shit out of you. Yeah. See, now they can't touch you. See, now they can't touch you. If a player couldn't touch me, they couldn't guard me. Because first of all, my height made me different. I was a 6'6" point guard. There was none there, and they still really are there. Then I had the speed of a tiny Archibald. That's what made me good.
Yeah.
My height and my speed.
Yeah. Well, you were a very good defender also. You and Chaney.
Yeah, but but that's because of my height and my speed. You still don't have, point guards, at 6'5", 6'6", guards that big.
Yeah. No. Well, Charlie, last question. What are some of the things that you've enjoyed post basketball? What are some of the projects and jobs that you worked on that you've enjoyed?
To be honest with you, I've had a pretty good life. Going to Carolina. Every Carolina fan, makes me feel special. So anywhere you go, there's always a Carolina fan. So it's been very. I've been fortunate. I think. I paid dues to get there, but the dues were worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Charlie, this has been a thrill talking to you, man. You're a hero to me growing up. You're a historic figure in basketball and in the South and the civil rights movement. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Okay, no problem. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, thanks, Charlie, and
okay.
best luck with everything.
Okay, buddy.
Okay, buddy. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.